Hi, my name is Louise Frampton. I'm the editor of Clinical Services Journal. I'm reporting here from IDSc, and I'm joined by Ellie Wishart, who's the Senior Medical Affairs Manager for Nanosonics. So Ellie, I wonder if you could just tell us a little about what you do.
So I lead the medical affairs strategy for EMEA for Nanosonics, primarily looking at our markets, our biggest markets, UK and Ireland, Germany, and our growing markets across Europe. So that involves working with healthcare professionals, professional associations, key opinion leaders, and ensuring as well that we have a really sound and robust clinical education for healthcare professionals who are using our technology.
So what is the level of infection risks that hospitals face in terms of decontamination of ultrasound probes? Why is it so important to get it right, and what can happen if we don't follow best practice?
So there's lots of evidence out there and lots of documented, published, peer-reviewed articles around the risk in ultrasound. I think for healthcare professionals it's very difficult for them to understand that because they don't physically see it. So a big part of what I think is important is to try and highlight that risk. So within the ultrasound environment, as well as the use of the actual probe itself that has contact with the patient, it's really important to emphasise that those probes can become contaminated during use. They can become contaminated, in terms of passing on transmission of infection from one patient to another. So there's reported evidence around risk with HPV, for example, not only in women's health but across all aspects of healthcare. So where ultrasound is used, I think there's lots of opportunities to be able to reduce that risk of infection. So I think a lot of people don't realise with healthcare-associated infection, up to 55% of them are actually preventable. So it's not an inevitable consequence of being in healthcare that you'll pick up an infection. We can prevent them. So I think it's really important to highlight those risks for healthcare professionals and really emphasise, where the risk can happen, but then ensure that they know their own role and responsibility in terms of reducing that transmission risk. And part of that is appropriate decontamination of probes when they're in use.
So what are the benefits of automated reprocessing?
With an automated system, one of the most important aspects that you get obviously then is the fact that it is reproducible every time, so you get the same process, you get the same level of high level disinfection, for example, with every transducer. So the idea is that you're also able to factor in lots of traceability elements, so there's traceability in terms of the user itself. You can then link that to the patient, but also it's making sure that you can trace the probe and the process to that probe. So the traceability element of what automation brings is highly important. So as we know, we talked about transmission risk. If there are any issues with the probe, the fact that you can then look back on that, and if you have an automated system that are able to capture that digitally, it's very easy to find that information. So if you're in a situation where you are investigating an outbreak, for example, you can find those patients that might have been affected by use of a particular probe. But automation as well ensures that you can deliver high-level disinfection in a way that it's fully enclosed, and there's no contact with chemistry. Chemistry is important. Chemistry is something that we rely on, and there is an aspect then that you can be able to use it as a kind of hands-off exercise. Automation also means that when you bring a system like that into a healthcare environment, it means then it's hands-off time for the clinicians.
Right.
So working that into their workflow, as soon as they use an automated system, the amount of time that then that probe is within the system, you can then use that time to do other activities. So in fact, you end up having a very efficient workflow. But at the heart of that is making sure that you have consistently high-level disinfection delivered every time.
Some really important points there. So I know there's been some really interesting developments this year in terms of guidance in Wales specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
I think what we've seen with the publication of the new Welsh guidelines is following suit from other regions around the UK, recognising first of all the need for guidance. So it allows those clinicians and allows all the different stakeholders in the healthcare to really understand the aspects of cleaning, disinfection, and generally that's the umbrella term across all of that around decontamination and the importance of each of those steps. And within that, the guidance is enabling clinicians to make informed decisions. So it's enabling that piece around understanding the importance of the different steps of decontamination. And one of the things that I really liked that we saw in this guidance was an examination of the cleaning step as well.
Right.
So to achieve good disinfection, you need to make sure that cleaning is done in the first place beforehand. So to achieve the high level that you need, that aspect of looking at cleaning is critically important. So the guidance gave some insight into that. It gave some insights into terms of, how clinicians can perform that cleaning step, but also how important it is. But I think it's a really good way forward to see how, alongside the other nations within the UK, to be able to ensure that guidance will really underpin what we see that's happening, and bringing it in line with what we recognise in reprocessing of other medical devices such as endoscopes. So it's definitely been very welcomed.
So I understand you're doing a lot as well as a company to support Trust with the launch of the ultrasound infection prevention toolkit. What is that exactly? Can you tell us something about it?
So the toolkit was something that was developed by UK and Irish experts. So it's experts across decon, infection prevention, to be able to give a tool essentially that you start off with auditing where your hospital is in terms of looking at decon of their ultrasound probes. So in a way it gives you a ready-made tool that you start off with an audit. It allows you to find all your ultrasound probes, because one of the biggest challenges when you start to address how decontamination is happening is wondering where all these ultrasound probes are. Ultrasound use is growing all the time, so the departments that are using ultrasound are growing all the time. So essentially the toolkit allows you then to really examine your practices today. It allows you to risk assess what you're doing today and put in some measures. So you end up with a policy, a framework that allows you then to ensure that decontamination of ultrasound probes can happen. One thing that we found is absolutely invaluable is the fact that it really can enable bringing together decon infection prevention teams with a common goal. It gives them a way to do it, and often that's the first barrier that they have. So they want to be able to try and fix this situation, and the toolkit allows them to do that. And so we've ensured that the toolkit is not product focused in any way, it's not commercially attached to anything, it sits on its own website, and it's something that can be accessed and used by anybody. You can download the tools for free, and so we have many different hospitals who are now several audits in and are able to see their continued improvement of that.
So what role will intelligent technology have in advancing this as well? I mean, particularly around traceability, for example. How important is it, and what's happening at the moment in terms of innovation in that area?
So traceability, being able to ensure that you can obviously have electronic records is key. And I mentioned earlier in terms of investigating outbreaks. If your traceability is purely paper-based, it will take you a very long time to complete that traceability exercise. So using traceability technology such as RFID, where you can tag and use user cards, instrument tags, but also all of the technology consumables that you're using within an automation process. So everything is traced back to the whole process and every parameter that's being used. So I think technology like that, we're used to it in everyday life, but seeing it in terms of how we then track the use of medical devices and track their decontamination status is critical.
Excellent. And just one last final question. What do you think needs to happen next to progress decontamination in ultrasound probes? What's next on the horizon, do you think?
I think we can't underestimate the need for education. I mentioned highlighting the risk. So everybody that's involved in ultrasound decontamination, I think, I would like to see that progress further. I'd like to see it more on the agenda in terms of the core infection prevention education that happens within hospitals. And so people can really then understand the environment that they work in. So in their scenario, what they do every single day, they can really understand exactly all the infection prevention steps they take. And that includes things like hand hygiene, things like the different consumables that they're using, but also making sure that they understand their own role. And I think you can't really underestimate the value of ensuring people really understand why they're doing what they're doing, rather than being given a set of instructions. If they understand how they're protecting patients, and that they understand why they're doing it, and they're also protecting themselves. So for me, I'd really like to see how that education is pushed forward, how we provide some digital tools for that, for example. You can't underestimate sometimes the value of peer-to-peer training. So Something that Nanosonics are very keen to do is that we will have, in a lot of our different hospitals, we will have somebody in the department who is like a super user. They're somebody that can then push forward the education in different topics. So I think it allows that network to develop, and allows then that kind of drive and understanding of education. And actually we find that it's really engaging with the staff as well.
Excellent. Some really interesting points there. Ellie, thank you so much for giving up the time.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.